Today we're going to go over Chapter 2. Chapter 2 starts money management skills, and so we're going to go through some of those basic skills. One of the things we want to be able to do here that's up on the slide, we want to identify the main components of wise money management. In other words, what's the smart thing to do, what's not the smart thing to do. Also, what works for you. That's a lot of what we're going to be trying to get to. We're going to create a personal balance sheet and a cash flow statements at the end here. We're also going to get to developing a budget. Now, a lot of people, when they think budget, they think, oh my God, this is draconian, it's going to limit my spending, it's no fun, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of a budget, what you can do is a spending plan, right? What you get to spend money on. Now, it's the exact same thing, but it's just kind of a much different mental perspective. Budgets are in place to make your life better, not to make your life horrible. If you do a budget and you want to save some money and you plan on eating out once a week, and then by the time you get through it, you go, man, I don't want to eat out once a week. I mean, my friends are going out, they're doing this, I'm missing too much. I want to eat out 3 times a week. Then adjust your budget and eat out 3 times a week. And then pick some items that maybe you don't like as much. Maybe you'll go to the movies a little bit less. Maybe you'll drop a couple cable channels or something like that. But this budget is not something that's fixed in cement. A budget is fluid. It's going to change depending on what's going on in your life. It could change depending on season. And when you figure out, I would rather spend $100 eating out than $200 a month on something else, then make that adjustment, okay? And we're also going to look at a few ways that saving money is going to help your overall financial goals. All right, so when we look at money management, we talk about money management, we're looking at the day-to-day financial activities of what you're doing. We're looking at your daily spending and saving decisions. Most of us are not broke because we spent $5,000 on something. Most of the time when we're broke, and certainly depends on income, but you go broke $20 at a time. You spend 20 on this, 20 on that, 20 on this, 20 on that. You're typically not going broke because of the $2 you spent on a soda or even the $800 you spent on the laptop. What happens is you lose control of those $20 items. For me, it just, for whatever reason, whenever I'm broke, I go back and I look at everything that I spent on, and it seems like there is a massive string of things about $125. It's like I spent $118 on this, and then $127, and then $94, and then $162, and $128, and $113, and on and on and on. And you look back, you go, what the heck did I spend all that money on? Typically, if I need, say, new tires for my car, which might cost me $700, $800, I know that expense is coming, or a new computer, or something like that, or even a roof on the house, which might cost $5,000. We tend to plan for those big things. And so what we're really trying to accomplish in money management is how do we get a hold of those $20, $40, or $60 items that tend to destroy our budget. And what we're really looking at is that string of $20, $30, $40 items, is it worth not having the savings? If you really enjoy those items and you want to save less and you know that then your retirement isn't going to be as good, then you can make that decision. Because there's 2 mistakes we can make here in financial planning. One is to oversave. And I know that sounds like that can't be true, but it is. We got one life here that we're going to go around with. The idea is not to work 80 hours a week, every single week, save every single penny, don't go on vacations, don't own a nice car, don't own a nice house, and end up at 65 with $10 million. That's a wasted life. You missed all your kids' baseball, the girls' softball, graduations, parties because you were working double shifts. So there's some sort of balance there. Now, we can't go the other way also, and we can't be in a situation like, unfortunately, about 40% of America is, where they have less than $800 saved. I mean, that's a pretty scary number. About 40% of all Americans have $800 or less in savings. So we don't want to get into a situation where we live for today, live for today, live for today, and then we get to retirement at 65 and we have absolutely no money. And so part of what we're going to try to do is balance that, and we're going to be maximizing our enjoyment not only now but also in retirement. Okay. So what are some of the components of money management, right? Well, the first one is storing and maintaining personal financial records. So in other words, the stuff that comes in, a lot of it you need to save. And the reason you need to save it is so you can go back and track your expenses, track your income, track your net worth, because we want to be able to see what direction are we going. Are we saving the amount of money that we want to save? Is our net worth growing? How much do we need for a new house? All of those are pretty much going to come from our financial records. And you do not have to come up with some massively sophisticated system where you've got 35, 40 files running with everything situated and broken out. No, not at all. I certainly have a huge filing cabinet broken out on a lot of other tabs because I do consulting work, had a couple small businesses. So mine is rather sophisticated. But until I started operating some businesses and stuff like that, I pretty much had only 5 or 6 files. And so you have one file for your automobile where everything for your car goes in it. You have one file for taxes, and everything that you think is going to affect your taxes goes in that. You have a file for receipts for things with warranties. Like I've got a file that's just warranty-related items in my house, so I can keep track of them. Whatever system works for you works for you. And you need to come up with some sort of system early in life because it's very easy when your life's not very complicated, right? You're saving a couple of credit card receipts, your computer warranty, and your W-2s or something like that, just 2 or 3 little files. And then as your life gets more complex, it's easy to add another file, add another file, add another file. If you never start a system, then it all implodes. And you can't then go, man, now I need some super sophisticated system, because it takes practice. All right. Also on the storing and maintaining the records, do what works for you. My grandma and grandpa had a great system that worked very well for them, and it was called the envelope system. My grandpa would come back from work, and my grandma worked part-time sometimes. They would take all their money for the week, and they would divide it up into envelopes. So much for rent, so much for food, so much for utilities, so much for extra spending, and then savings. And they would save that way, and it worked very well for them. A lot of people would think that I would have an incredibly sophisticated tracking system running Quicken or Microsoft Money or something with lots of charts tracking every penny that I spend. That's not true. My system is very simple. I don't track every penny. I'm not a big chart guy, so I don't have a bunch of charts and stuff like that. But I do have an awful lot of raw numbers, and I'm able to track my income every single year, increases, decreases, track my expenses every year, and track my net worth. All right, so the number 2 one there is creating personal financial statements. So we're going to go over here in a couple minutes how to do a basic balance sheet and a basic cash flow statement, also called an income statement. And after we've done those, the last thing on the list here for the book is creating and implementing a plan for savings and spending, i.e. budgeting or a spending plan. One thing that is missed in your book here that I think is really critical is you need to set goals. So how you're going to spend your money, what's important in your life, comes back to your goals, And your goals should be the driving force in your planning. And as you can see in your book, I set it up that goals come first. Because how do we know how we want to spend our money if we haven't written down and established what's important to us? So goals are critical in this money management. You need to make goals simple and clear, and goals that you value, not goals that your parents value or someone else values. Especially if you're married or in a relationship, is to communicate those goals. Because it's very hard to save for a house and to save $25,000 if you haven't defined what type of house we want, where we want to live, and create that vision. Otherwise, spending money is always more fun than saving it for something you haven't defined. And once you've defined your goal, buying a house, buying a car, paying off your school loans, whatever it is, then it's actually very easy to say, hey, we're not going to eat out tonight and spend $85. We're going to put that towards our house. We're not going to eat out and spend $85. I would rather pay that towards paying off one of my loans. The decisions become easy when you have shared goals. If you have goals that don't match or haven't defined any goals, then you're like a ship without a rudder and very hard to control and doesn't work very well at all. So what are some of the things here when we talk about debt? Well, first, one of the things that you need to do is evaluate your own credit situation. So you want you to get all your Visa cards, American Express, MasterCards, etc., and write down the account numbers, how much you have to pay each month, and what is the total amount to pay it off. You need to get a handle on what your debts are. We then want to start tracking our spending. The easiest thing to do is just keep a piece of paper and write down every single expense. That includes the $5 at Starbucks, $1.19 if you're going to get a soda, $45 for this, $80 for that. And a lot of people don't like doing that because they think, well, now I'm going to pass judgment on all this, and I know my spending is out of control, and I know I shouldn't be going to Starbucks every day, or I shouldn't be doing this, and so therefore I'm not going to write those items down, or I'm not going to do this. No, you really need the information for yourself. Track all your spending. I'm not saying you should give up Starbucks at $5 a day or $4.35 a day or however much money you're spending on coffee. If that is something you really, really enjoy, then keep it in your budget. For some people, they look at that and they say, well, I do like Starbucks coffee, but I don't necessarily like going to Starbucks. And so they're going to buy premium coffee at home and a single cup maker, and that's going to cost them $1 a day instead of $4 because they still want to drink really good premium coffee. That's fine, right? These are decisions you make. Some other things on credit, if you've got really bad credit, one of the things we want to do is start making your payments on time. In credit, time heals all wounds, just like in love. The further you get away from your poor payment history, the better off your credit gets. All right. Some of the other things that we want to do is organize our financial records, right? We touched on this a little bit before. But by organizing this and coming up with some sort of system, we're going to make much more effective investment decisions, tracking our investments, and know where our investments are at. I talk to a lot of people and say, well, how much money do you have in your retirement? And they go, I don't know, I own a couple mutual funds, and I think there's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in there, I don't know. Or I don't know, there's $100,000, $150,000. Well, there's a big difference between those. I'm not saying that you need to do an analysis every single day or every single week and know within $100 how much money you have in your retirement at any given time. In fact, most studies show that people that spend tons of time watching the stock market, watching their retirement, tend not to do very well in the market because they tend to overtrade, they tend to overthink, and it adds a ton of stress in your life. And so I think you should check your investments about once every 3 months and make any adjustments that need to be done from there. All right, so now that we're creating this system, what sort of records do we need to keep track of? You certainly need to keep personal and employment records. You need to keep copies of your reviews, especially if they're good. You need to keep copies of promotions, copies of sales competitions you've won, or anything like that. Because more and more employers are getting to the point where they're saying, if you call for a reference, we will give you the fact the person worked here, the date they started, and their position, and the last day of employment and their position. They won't even say whether the person quit, fired, laid off, whether they won any sales awards, whether they're a good employee, a bad employee, because employers more and more do not want to get sued over giving a bad recommendation. They also don't want to get sued, quite frankly, over giving a good recommendation, and then there's huge problems somewhere else. This happens obviously much, much more with big executives. And then the company looks back at the post-employment and says, wow, you fired that person for mismanagement and possibly misappropriation of funds, but yet you gave them an incredibly glowing recommendation. So you set us up for the fraud that they committed. So you want to track all of those. You want to keep all your tax records. One of the questions is, how long should I keep my tax records for? Well, some people say you should keep them for 3 years, for 7 years. There's a lot of things going on. In my opinion, you keep them forever. And when we get into taxes, we'll talk about that later. But you should keep your tax records forever. Certainly any credit card records. We want to keep insurance records, investment records. You want to keep those things for at least 2 or 3 years, right? And certainly any estate planning records that you might have. Some of the other things is what should be in a safe deposit box. And do I need a safe deposit box? Personally, I don't have a safe deposit box. But there's an awful lot of records that I want backups of, and there's an awful lot of things I don't want in my house in case it burns down. So I actually have a small little portable safe for documents that I bought at Walmart that was reasonably priced. And in there, I've got a copy of my will, a copy of my life insurance, a copy of my homeowner's insurance, and I've got a disc that has photos of my house and photos of all my possessions. And then that box is over at my mom and dad's house. So if my house burns down, I have access to all those documents plus photos of all my personal possessions. So for insurance reasons, I can recreate that. My parents have a similar one at my house at the same time. And so if you have enough money in your account that you want to keep all of those records, then sometimes you get a free safe deposit box. And a couple banks at different times at different levels or promotions, and I've had free safe deposit boxes, and they've worked out really well. Sometimes, if it's a reasonable price, maybe it's worth $25 to you, $50 a year to do that. So maybe you want a safe deposit box. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go over the basics of a balance sheet and an income statement. All right, we're going to look at a very simple, basic balance sheet. A balance sheet is an incredibly important document for you to develop to track how you're doing in life, how you're doing in life financially. So when we look at assets here, an asset is anything that has value. So some of our assets are going to be like our car. Our car is going to be an asset. It has a value. We've got liabilities. So we've got assets, liabilities, and down here under NW is what's called net worth. So on the liability side, we got our car loan. So I might have a car that's worth $8,000 and a car loan of $4,000. And so net worth is basically a plug figure to balance these two sides out. I take my assets minus liabilities equals net worth. So net worth is basically if I sold everything that I had that had value, paid off all my debts, how much money do I have left over? In this case, assets $8,000 minus liabilities $4,000 gets me a net worth of $4,000. It is incredibly important that you're able to track net worth. In fact, in my opinion, net worth is the most important number you need to track. More important than income, that's for sure. Because there's an awful lot of people that make $200,000 a year and they spend $200,000 a year and they have no money left over. So then when they go to retire, they have nothing. When you get sick and when you retire, you live off net worth. Net worth can also be negative. Let's say we also have a student loan, and that student loan is $5,000. We take our total assets, $8,000 minus $9,000 equals a negative $1,000. So that's what balanced these two sides out. If you take $9,000 and you add to $9,000 a negative $1,000, you end up with $8,000 on this side and $8,000 on that side. That's why we call this kind of a plug figure. Net worth, if your liabilities are greater than your assets, you'll have a negative net worth. If your assets are greater than your liabilities, you'll have a positive net worth. There's a couple different ways that we can impact net worth. We can increase assets without adding liabilities. So let's say that grandma gives us $2,000. So on this side, I got some cash, $2,000, which means my total assets here are $10,000. 10,000 minus 9,000 equals a positive $1,000. And so we added $2,000 in assets, and what it did is it raised our net worth by $2,000. From a negative $1,000 to a positive $1,000 is a $2,000 change. Another way that we can increase our net worth is by reducing liabilities. So let's say that for a graduation gift, instead of grandma giving you $5,000 cash, she says, I'll tell you what, I'll write a check to your student loan company and I'll pay off your student loan for you of $5,000. So grandma comes in and pays off this $5,000 student loan, and now that student loan is zero. So now we're going to take 10,000 minus 4,000 equals $6,000 in net worth. I got rid of $5,000 liability, and my net worth went up $5,000. Now, if we add the same amount to both sides, because this number is to balance us out, if we add equal amounts to both sides, we'll get no change. So let's say we go out and we buy a jet ski or something like that. We get a decent deal on a jet ski. I buy a $5,000 jet ski, so I'm adding $5,000 in assets because I own the jet ski. I borrowed $5,000 for my jet ski loan, right? So now on this side, I've got a total of $15,000 in assets. My total loans are $9,000. 15,000 minus 9,000 equals 6,000. So our net worth was unaffected when we add the same amount to both sides when we borrow money. One of the devastating things that happens to net worth is actually buying new cars. Buying a brand new car tends to devastate your net worth. Because let's say that we've got our one car, and we're going to just kind of make this simple, and you even have no loans right now. An $8,000 car, no loans, and we'll even give you a couple $1,000s of cash. So I've got $10,000 in assets. I've got my car. I got $2,000. That's 10. 10 minus 0. My net worth is $10,000. Then I go out and I buy a new car. And I'm going to buy a nice car because, I deserve it, basically. So that's why. So I go out and I buy a $30,000 car. Well, one thing for sure, I'm going to spend more than $30,000 for a $30,000 car because I've got taxes, licensing, and a whole bunch of other fees that are going to be wrapped up in that thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend my $2,000 cash just on licensing and taxes. And I'm going to buy car number 2. And we're going to get a $30,000 car. And I'm going to borrow $30,000. So at this point, I spent money on the licensing. I spent money on the taxes part of the car. I used up my cash here a little bit. Now I got $38,000 minus 30. I'm down to $8,000 bucks. So I'm not going to get that back. So that certainly hurts us a little bit, but everybody knows that's coming. The problem is, as soon as I drive my new car out on the street and the tires get dirty, what happens to my car? Within 2 months, you're going to lose at least 20, 30% of the value of that car. So almost immediately, this car is going to drop to, say, $26,000. And then you turn around a couple months later, and now we're sitting here at $22,000. And we haven't really had enough time to pay this loan off. For the first 3 years, the value of my car is going to drop much faster than the loan. And so if I add these up now, I used to have a net worth of $10,000. I got my 2 cars, and that's now worth $30,000. I have a $30,000 car loan. My net worth went to 0. And so when you are considering buying cars, when you're doing your financial worksheets, the most important number to track is net worth. Because when you retire, you live off net worth. Because net worth basically is then, what are all my assets? I've got my retirement account. I got my house. Hopefully I've got my house paid off. I don't have a lot of car loans. I paid off my student loans. And so this side of the ledger you're hoping is going to be really small, and this side of the ledger you're hoping is going to be really big. And so the one number that sums all of that up is net worth. That's more important than liabilities. If I told you I have a friend that has $26 million in liabilities, you might look at that and go, wow, that's horrible. He owes an ungodly amount of money, cannot get out of that hole, but he owns a lot of commercial real estate, and he owns $50 million in commercial real estate. Well, if you own $50 million in commercial real estate, $26 million in liabilities certainly does not seem like much at all. And quite frankly, it's not. If you have an $8,000 car and you have a $14,000 car loan, and on top of that, you have another $20,000 in credit cards and $15,000 in student loans, and all your other assets, furniture and whatever else, adds up to, say, another $6,000 of miscellaneous whatever. Now I'm sitting on $14,000 in assets, and I'm sitting on, what do we got here, $35,000, $45,000, $49,000 of liabilities. All of a sudden, this looks like somebody who's out of control and someone who is in a big hole that they have to dig out of. And so the plug figure that we're going to be looking at here is net worth, because this individual has a net worth of negative $35,000, which means whenever this is negative, the term for that is insolvency, and this person's insolvent. They got a long way to go to dig themselves back to zero. And that's what we're going to cover on balance sheet.